Yeah, well, it's the second time.
I think it's more than that, but anyway.
Okay. Anyway, we're live, and Jeff is going to give us the synopsis of the episode whilst I start the slides.
I don't think it qualifies as an actual synopsis, but anyway, what IMDb says about this episode, by the way, it's Man and Machine. The episode's called $1 Billion Baby, and it originally aired July 7th, 1992 on NBC. Written as usual by Robert De Laurentiis and Dick Wolf, and directed by Vern Gillum. And the description says, a genetically engineered baby is sought by baby brokers who will kill to find the child. The baby's presence prompts parental instincts in Eve. So, yeah. That's
Can I just say, teleplay Nancy Ann Miller.
Okay.
And I think that touch might have come through in the storyline with the baby and the way Eve was written. But back to you, Jeff.
And I will say before I forget that this episode featured a guest starring appearance by an actress who became more famous several years later for being on the show Sex and the City, Kristen Davis. I never watched that show, but yet I still had a dream about her once. So I figured I'd throw that in there.
Was it a good one, Jeff?
It was a good one. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, especially because most people will probably be bored by it anyway, but I'll say that the funny part about it was I was presenting at some award show, sort of like the Emmys, but it was in some like hotel lobby, and the deal was that she and I were involved in personally, and when it came time for me to read the award, I read her name, and it's possible that she wasn't actually the one on the award because there was like controversy afterwards. Kind of like what happened for real in the Oscars when Marissa Tomei won her Oscar for My Cousin Vinny, and there were people that thought that Jack Palance read the envelope wrong. But it was confirmed by several people later on that was in fact the correct thing. But some people thought he just read it wrong, that he was reading one of the nominees instead of the winner. But anyway, so in my dream, there was similar speculation that somehow she wasn't the real winner, but because we were involved somehow, I had decided to announce her as the winner. But
Jeff, anyway. did they change it so? Oh yeah, I just wondered if they changed it. Anyway, so yeah, I'll get onto that later on. I have something about her eyeball. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I'm looking at these pictures, of course, I can say you can see a few other things that happened where Morgan was watching this with me, so he had comments about how stupid the people were in various capacities. Though he gave Eve credit for pulling the trigger when he told her to, but then he also said she should have taken out the person after that because she already proved she could do it without hurting the baby. But anyway, I speculated after she threw the baby that maybe it was a fake baby, but it turned out to be a real one. I mean, in the show. I don't mean in real life. Obviously, they didn't actually throw a baby.
Health and safety standards have moved on, but even in those days, they cared about babies.
I'm quite certain they didn't actually do that, but anyway, they did a better job than some things do, though, at the not making it too obvious during the scenes where they didn't have a real baby in the scene. And the other thing that was interesting, and Morgan pointed out because he hasn't seen the previous episodes of this, so it was fresh for him. It's funny because now 2 weeks in a row I've watched this with somebody who's never seen it before, so they both saw those individual episodes and not any of the rest. But he asked me because near the end when Eve looks like she's about to cry, he asked me, does she actually have like tear ducts? Is it part of her system to cry? And I said, I don't know, because I think this is the first time they've actually shown her looking like she was about to. So I don't know, but I would say there were some things about this episode that made it seem like maybe in production this was actually earlier than some of the episodes that aired before it. For one thing, the conversations about like why people have kids and stuff like that, it feels like we've either had those conversations before or had references to having this conversation in episodes that actually aired previously. So it's possible that the production order, that they aired out of order.
Yeah.
Even though there's not a continuing storyline exactly which is probably why they could air it out of order and think there would be no problem with that. But anyway, I would say it seemed like an earlier episode in some of the conversations that Bobby and Eve had with each other.
What they might have done, though, is they also might have thought, technically, these things have been mentioned before, and they maybe have to do the balance between that 10% of the audience that's really listening in terms of like, and they've got like the timeline of when stuff was done, versus do we have to repeat this for the 90% of the audience that doesn't remember it from 2 or 3 episodes before?
I do remember thinking when the Kristen Davis character came in that it looked like a fake pregnancy, but I wasn't sure if it was just the production didn't do a very good job of making her look pregnant or whether it was really supposed to be fake.
Oh, yeah. Like you see it in so many programs, and presumably when it's an actress who's never had a baby, and they walk around and they don't get up like this. And just get up and it's like whoosh, and it's like, whoa. Yeah.
And I have to get up like that, and I'm not even pregnant. I'm just old.
Yeah, that's like the sketch from Peter Cook and Dudley Moore when he pretends to be pregnant. He goes, "No, ballon," and he goes, "No, baby," and he just bursts it. Yeah, yeah. Right. Sorry for that. I've thrown myself off track. Yeah, so I have some notes. Have you any more thoughts on the episode, Jeff?
Well, I'm sure some will probably come to me, but
okay,
not yet. So go ahead.
So for a start, there was a bit in this where there was one particular line that Yancey Butler delivered, and it was so raw and so real, and it was like you could tell that the actress was really feeling it. But she didn't overact in the moment. It was perfectly pitched. Oh, what happened to your camera, Jeff?
I turned it off temporarily. Continue.
Okay. And I thought she absolutely nailed the delivery on the line. I didn't want to give him back. It was so real. It touched me in the way she delivered that line. Really nailed it. So I sort of put the note that in that is like, that's when it's like someone's really feeling it.
Whereas I wonder if maybe she was a little bit too emotive in that moment. But then I discussed with Morgan the idea that they talked about in the first episode where they said she was like emotionally like a child. But of course I said at the time then it seems like she would have more childish tantrums as her emotional side came out. But this was the closest she had to that. I think it was probably the most emotive that she's been.
But so the thing is that if we go with INTP for her, that's an INTP thing though. Like, and Dario said that when he hooked up, somebody was like INTP, and it's like most of the time there's like no emotion, but then when they get embarrassed, they like get more embarrassed than anybody else. And so maybe it's that thing with in function terms with that inferior FE.
Well,
there's a certain point where it can come out that emotional
part. Yeah, in INTP humans. I'm just talking about this character.
yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, if we're saying that she's like, if we are saying, if the character, I see what you mean, but I sort of interpret her as INTP.
I know. I'm just putting forth an alternative viewpoint that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I've got to say with them. I've got to say with the mic. No, there was a thing with the Eve's eyeball. Like, it's not impossible, but we could hear sound on her eyeball. So her eyeball has a mic and a power supply.
Yeah, Morgan commented on that too.
But at least they did the thing where they covered it with a line in terms of getting the eyeball to stick. Oh, my optic nerve, like, being able to get it to stick up there. And also, they're putting a bit of a stupid place by initially putting it in a stupid place by putting it under the basketball ring, where it's like the ball could like knock it off, or it's like an easy place to see it. Now, probably they did that in order to have the thing where Mann would turn up later and then put it in a better place. But
Yeah, I mean, it could be that she's not really thinking in terms of how that's going to be used. Because again,
Yeah.
she's not
Oh,
really conditioned to what
I,
sort of the little quirks of what humans are going to do.
I think you said that Dick Wolf was someone who would work in things from real life into many of his stories.
Yeah, he did try
Right. So,
to make things realistic as when
so
possible.
there was one element that he brought in that was really powerful, and I don't know if you saw the news reports at the time about these children in homes in Romania under the Ceausescu regime.
Yeah, that's another one of those things where their timeline is kind of weird because
Yeah.
they want it to be significantly in the future, not like 100 years, but at least like 20 years or more. For somebody to have been that involved with Ceausescu, they'd have to be really old by that point because I mean that his reign ended in what 89, something like that, right around there.
Yeah, about 1990. I remember seeing it on the news when I saw it at lunchtime where he was shot, and then they never showed it in the later news. So
Yeah,
I got to see him shot live.
right. And I saw a documentary after it about that that Ted Koppel did, but it was very soon after that, and it talked about the fact that all these other Eastern Bloc countries, even though they'd had like demonstrations in the streets and things like that, that overall they were nonviolent revolutions in the sense that pretty much the old communist government can't, relinquish their power peacefully, where Romania was the one place where they actually had to rise up and kidnap the dictator himself. So, and they showed things like the tunnels that he had built underneath things to have like secret passageways all over the cities and stuff, and places where supposedly a bunch of people had been buried.
Jeff, I have something positive to say about your F preference.
Okay.
So I've got here, written by a woman, but Jeff could have written it. Like all the stuff with the baby.
That's something positive to say, huh?
Yeah, but don't you think that you would have been able to write that, given your experience and your preferences, that those particular scenes, say with Eve with the baby?
I don't know, because I've never been, even after I became a father, I've never been one of those people that's like, oh, I'm really comfortable around babies. Like kids, yes, even little kids, but they kind of need to be like at least toddler age or a little older. And again, it's not that I can't handle them at all before that, but I don't have this strong interest in I'm not like, oh, a baby, I love a baby. It's not like that. Like there's people that are like that with babies and with like animals that same way. They have that same way. And I also like animals, but don't have that same like attraction to them in that way. So
yeah, I mean, you don't have a pet dog,
baby, but I no, I don't. It's not that I couldn't have written it, but I don't have any particular expertise in that area of writing scenes with baby in general, because of the way that such things are recorded or produced. I know that it's often difficult to work with babies, so the scenes are somewhat awkward depending on what's going on. And usually whoever the baby's parents are like just off camera, because there's like laws about, child labor and stuff, and whether, that basically they have to kind of do a loophole there and have it being something the parents are present for, or else it's not legal. So in other words, that baby was not actually abandoned because you can't legally use an abandoned baby for something like this.
right?
Or kidnapped baby, or whatever it was supposed to be.
Yeah, there were a couple of good lines. First of all, I thought the camera work was really good for a TV show. Lots of good circular sort of tracking shots. There was one right at the beginning of the show, and it's stuff that's pretty rare in television, where they've not really got the time, and so they've got a good director in there who's not reliant on the editor and has basically planned everything out and not left it to the editor. Because
the second week in a row, though, where this police station with all of these people in it It's not like they're shorthanded. They got people everywhere, and somebody managed to sneak in and do something.
Yeah, but at least this one was craftier than the previous one.
A little bit, yeah, but
Yeah.
still. Morgan made that comment without even having seen the previous episode. He's like, these cops have been entrusted to protect the baby, and I'm like, yeah, they're establishing this place does not have very good security for a police station.
Oh yeah, and so there's something that we went over last week in terms of Eve's eyeball, and it's not conclusive proof, but this was Eve's eyeball. You know when she was playing it back, and they asked her, Eve, what did you see? And then when they showed like this is the closed circuit TV stuff, and it's not got that stuff down the side. But then when it's Eve's memory, it has that stuff
right
down the side. But when they did it the previous episode, they had the shot with the stuff down the side, and you said, oh, it could just be a closed circuit television camera. And I thought, hang on a minute, that looks like it's from Eve's point of view, but she stood in the wrong place.
Well, they had both, because they showed that she had seen him just walking past her. Yeah. But they had to look at the cameras to see everything else he did because she wasn't watching him.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, when they were looking at the cameras, it wasn't like this where there was like nothing down the side. The angle that they showed...
that could just be the particular computer has that stuff and they're establishing...
Yeah. So that's why I say it's just circumstantial evidence. It's not a slam dunk.
It could be that computer is the same operating system as her, so that they're compatible.
Yeah. There's ways around it, but I'll just read this bit out for. So Eve's playback has the alphanumeric down the side, but the CCTV didn't. Last week's episode also had the alphanumeric down the side. That shot could not be from Eve's point of view based on her position. That could have been CCTV with the alphanumeric down the side. Has it been established that only Eve's point of view has the vertical alphanumeric? We don't know that. It's just an argument from consistency. So there's a couple of good lines from Eve. Popped, an idiomatic expression meaning killed. Mann often uses it. And then my favourite line from Eve, which was again quite an INTP-ish line. He has a certain polish that seems at odds with the quality of earnestness. And then Mann replied, it's called smarm.
Yeah, that was a good line. I would say, to harken back to our wonderful Blake 7 reviews, he was a bit squirrely, too. Smarmy and squirrely.
Yeah, what? You didn't like Phil? I mean, honestly, I think they could have written him better. They could have written him a lot better.
I wouldn't say I disliked him. He was just, and I thought the actor did a good job. He was just convincingly squirrely. He was just kind of, just...
What is squirrely? I should have asked. We did all these reviews. I don't think I ever asked you what squirrely was.
I'm sure you did. Weaselly, just kind of, it's like this little rodent, You don't want
to let him in the Artan Club.
He's like this little annoying thing. No, he probably was an artisan, I think at the time we guessed probably like ISFP, but maybe ISTP, but I don't know. So somewhere in the borderline.
Yeah, what they're going to do is they're going to be consistent about making him smart in a sort of tactical way. They only sort of like gave lip service to that at times, and there was that one story. Anyway, we're doing this, so yeah, I thought her performance was good. Now, again, I wish I had the quality of, like, it's hard to tell if she's about to cry because the picture's not very bloody good.
Well, I did interpret it as that, just like
just by sort of like there, you can see like.
But he also asked, was she actually capable of crying? And I said, I don't know. I think there was some line where she talked about having all of the sort of physical capabilities of humans, which would probably include that, but I don't know for sure. Because, like, even with the eating thing, she's basically said that she doesn't need to eat, but that she can do it basically so that she fits in as a human. because you think it would be conspicuous if she never ate anything, and she can taste the flavors and stuff like that and make comments about them and that sort of thing.
Well, the Japanese do this sort of thing, you know, when they're trying to make these faces, like these robotic faces, and you might think, oh, you're going to put like a tear duct in there. And they might... I could see them doing that if they wanted to mimic.
Yeah, well, that in itself wouldn't seem too difficult to have as part of her construction. Like, there's other things that seem like they would be more difficult.
Oh, it would be a little bit spoofy. Maybe if it was like a different show, like if it was a sitcom, and she's crying, and it's like she suddenly stops, and it's like, what happened? Oh, I need to fill up. Or something like that.
Well, they did that with like the Jetsons, I think, had the robot maid, and it would like she was capable of crying, but then she would rust. Which I think they did that back in the day with the Tin Man on Wizard of Oz too, or something.
Yeah, so I pretty much like the episode. It didn't drag, and again, it's that theme I keep harkening back to. It's not so much about the plot, it's about how the plot affects Eve. And this was a good one for how it affected Eve. Oh, and that's just how somebody did the recording, I believe. I was just able to get that right at the end. So I think somebody used some kind of DVD recorder or something.
Yeah, I got the same file. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was distracted by other things too much, but or Morgan's comments pointing out things that he thought were cringy or whatever. So I don't know. I didn't find it especially super compelling, but it wasn't bad. But I didn't definitely think that the first half of the episodes overall have been stronger than the last few. So, you know, I don't know. I get the feeling maybe it's losing a little steam.
Yes, and also you got to think about if it had gone into another series, a full season, how many lessons can Eve learn without it becoming repetitive?
Yeah, honestly, if I was in charge, I would have said we need to come up with sort of a story arc, you know, of that shows her development as opposed to just sort of being a very slow. I mean, it could still be slow, but it needs to be something demonstrative that at a future episode you could look back and say, okay, here's where she's improved in these areas. And they had some sort of, almost like Capitu did with that episode where they were sort of recapping what had happened in the first 5, you know, kind of have something that sort of shows how she's developed from where she started, as opposed to sort of being something like this where there were multiple conversations where I almost felt like, you know, was this supposed to be earlier? Because it seems like she's starting closer to scratch on some of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I know for you, and I know a lot of modern television.
Like the lying thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but that was another thing where I'm like, didn't they have a discussion already about cops lying to get results? And she acts like she's never heard of it in this episode. Yeah.
And the thing is with arcs, and this is something, is that in 1992, I mean, I know you're a big you're a big watcher of soaps, and in there it's all arc stuff. It's all continuing storylines, and but generally, anyway, I won't go into that. But continuing storylines.
They had primetime cop shows that had them to, like Wise Guy, for instance. Definitely had story arcs, and they weren't real long. But you don't have to.
When was that?
To be long.
When was that? What era was that?
You know, last couple years of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. I think it was like 88 to 90 or 87 to 90 or, you know, somewhere around there.
Maybe it was a science fiction thing where, because I do remember with Babylon 5. Babylon 5 was a critical success. So the critics liked it, but the ratings were low and it was almost cancelled each year. And the sort of the narrative was that you got a complex show with these sort of 5 or 6 continuing story arcs. And I think before then, and there is that thing of like wanting episodes to be self-contained. And And they would even in the Doctor Who books that I had, they would say things like, if you did go back to continuity, if you did refer to previous things, it would say, "Oh, they're just writing it for the fans. Oh, they're just writing it for continuity for the fans. You got to write for a broader audience." That would always be the criticism. And so
that's kind of silly. Like, if it's just let's stuff as many references as we can possibly into it, then that I could see that being a fair criticism. But if it's actually worked into the show in reasonable ways that the characters would refer to things that already happened, like, we talked about on Homicide, where they would refer back to other cases that had happened before in a casual way that wasn't like clumsy about like, remember in episode 9B when, it was just the cops talk about previous cases. And so they came up and it was in a very natural way.
And as long as it doesn't stop somebody from understanding, as long as it's not key to the understanding of the episode,
right?
Then it's fine.
The characters would just talk about it. It was just sort of flavor to the episode. It wasn't something where even the episode where they did the callback where they solved the previous case involving the child witness. That was one of Cressetti's cases before, he died. And then afterwards, Howard had gotten the case and it broke her streak. They came back and eventually solved that case. And you didn't have to have seen the previous episode to still understand what was happening in the case where they wrapped it up.
Yeah, it's like, I'm pretty much the same way. It's like,
They showed the only relevant stuff, as sort of a flashback very briefly of what, so as long as you understood that, then that's all you really needed to have.
Yeah, I think the writers, it's like getting the position of, it's all right to throw in a line that the whole of the audience isn't going to get. It's just a throwaway line.
Yeah.
If it's not key to understanding the episode, like if they don't get every reference, it doesn't matter. Because if you assume that the audience has to get every single reference, then you're going to end up dumbing your writing down so much because you're going to be thinking, are all of the audience going to get this?
Yeah. I like that bit about Eve being able to speak the Romanian language that they were speaking.
Yeah.
And rattling off that stuff. That was a case where her kind of being that way was definitely fit into the flow of the episode. It didn't seem like contrived in any way. And it also, I like whenever shows have people speaking their native language instead of having them always speak English just for the audience.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I wanted to do that as well. Like, just have them speak and I don't like it when they overdub it, and they don't, like in certain sci-fi shows where the universal translator will make people speak English.
Yeah,
and their lips move in English.
Right.
I cut them a little bit of slack because it's television and they've not got enough time to actually have them they could just talk gibberish though, and then overdub it in English.
Yeah, it's especially weird in sci-fi things where they're not even speaking a real language, because then they could literally have them say whatever and it wouldn't matter. It's not like they have to worry about getting the exact syntax of a real language correctly.
Yeah, exactly. They could just move their lips, and then you can actually see it, and then overdub it, and it's like, oh, you see the universal translator really working. Because now we almost have them. We know where you have an app on your phone and it can translate.
Right. Yeah, there's just a slight delay.
Yeah, but it doesn't make people speak. Doesn't make their lips move in English.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to say. I think I even mentioned this in the video I did with Wojtek and sorry, I can't remember her name at the moment. But
Franca, was it Franca?
No, I don't think so. But anyway, I think I mentioned that.
Yeah.
The main thing I got out of German class, of having 2 years of German class in high school, was I know how to pronounce German. So if somebody shows me German written, I can tell you how to say it, but I don't know what it means, which before all of these translation apps and stuff could have come in handy if there was somebody traveling who had a translation book, but they needed my help to know how to say it. I could have done that for them.
So, Jeff, what did you think of the car chase, the car stunt at the end?
What do you mean? What I think of it?
Well, how do you rate it?
Individually, I don't know. It didn't drag on too long. That part was good, I guess.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good for a TV show.
Morgan made the comment that it didn't make any sense for her to ask Mann what muscle group, and then he doesn't even say a muscle group. He says shoulder, and then she does that, and then says that she should have calculated the trajectory or something about his speed, and that part didn't really make any sense. It seemed like kind of clumsy.
Yeah.
Because it seems like up to this point, she hasn't had to ask him for any advice as far as the physical aspects of the job.
Yeah.
Her questions have been about human stuff, emotional things, human cultural things. And so it was random for her to suddenly ask him that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the worst mistake they made with her was like they're having her wait around like a donut for him to tell her, "Eve, we've got to leave the house. There's a bomb in there." That's where
technically she outranks him, so she's supposed to be slightly more experienced because of her training that she received. So she shouldn't be asking him questions like that, especially to do with physical things, because she should know those things already.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's that because and won't forget them and instantly recall it. But
I don't know. I guess they could explain that away for her having the odd emotional thing with the child that was messing her up. But then they could have thrown in a line with her saying that, or
they had that bit where she got the woman, and and Mann was saying, "My partner is very motivated at the moment," and then she was like,
right, yeah,
twisting her arm. Yeah.
Yeah, that part was good. I thought that made sense. The other part was just a little clumsy.
Yeah, this bit with the eyeball, like you're not going to notice that.
Yeah, should have at least been some kind of disguise over it or something, some sort of device that covered it but was still see-through, so the camera would work or whatever. But yeah, it does make you wonder. So does she hear through her eyes? Are the ears just decoration?
Yeah, I know that was a bit. But again, that's one of those things where they might think, what percentage of the audience are going to notice that?
Yeah, right. Like you said, with the fans versus common audience, like most people, first of all, are not going to record this. They're just watching it once as it's being transmitted, so they're not nitpicking a bunch of things about it. But obviously somebody with Morgan's personality and observation skills would still make the comments he did at the time. I remember my father making a lot of sarcastic comments about when I would watch any kind of action shows. There was one show which he liked the show, but he still badmouthed how much things happened. Was the show Airwolf from the 80s, because I don't remember the show well enough to know the specifics, but I know somehow it involved like Air Force helicopters or something like that. And he would make sarcastic comments about some of the unrealistic things that they did with those, but he still enjoyed the show enough to keep watching it.
Oh yeah, a good intro sequence, and the full tune is on YouTube. Yeah, I remember that where the lead actor Ernest Borgnine said that the lead actor could remember. It was a bit wooden, but he could remember lines very quickly. He could learn lines very quickly. So yeah, I thought it was a good performance from Yancey Butler. I just wish that the picture was as good as the previous week, because
Airwolf, created by the same guy who made Quantum Leap, by the way, Don Bellisario.
Ah, yes. And also, he worked on the original Battlestar Galactica. And he wrote the story in Galactica 1980. The final episode was called The Return of Starbuck. And it was a bit of a comedy episode. And the robot Cylon, he brings back a woman. And he says, and Starbuck asks him, "Why did you bring her back?" And he replies, "There was not much of a selection." So he repairs the Cylon and he makes it into a bit of a comedy robot. And so that was a good episode, The Return of Starbuck. So, right then. So, this bit is a bit prescient, like with all the options.
Yeah, that seemed like a time filler or something. Like they had an extra 2 minutes to fill. They're like, let's have them have a weird thing with the drink machine, because he's already used the drink machine in previous episodes, and it didn't take him that long. So
yeah, maybe they upgraded it. All these options.
Then he should have said something like, this new drink machine or something, but instead it was just sort of random.
Yeah, I get that with ATMs, but like sometimes I think you don't need to have all these steps. You can just have more options on the screen, and then you can go through. Do you want to do this? No, just have the option on there and go straight to it.
It was funny to have him go through the whole process, and then it gave him the wrong thing, though. That was funny. Which I guess was supposed to be the whole joke, but it just was kind of random. It seemed not the same way, but almost like the scenes that they had in the previous episode where Eve was sort of trying to seduce him, in a manner of speaking, where it seemed like those whole interactions were sort of out of place in the rest of the episode. This sort of was similar in that it kind of randomly put in there.
Those sort of comedy scenes, I think said last week that they were sort of like they repeated the beats too much, and if they shortened the scene, tightened it up, and I think that was the one with the guy where maybe they thought they knew they had a problem with the main villain being a bit rubbish and a bit overacted, and so they compensated by having more of those comedy scenes, but the material didn't sort of warrant that amount of time to be spent on it, and so there was some repetitious comedy beats. But I just thought that this bit maybe has come true about all these options and going through all of these steps.
I don't know. Has it?
It just reminds me of the kind of thing of all of these choices.
Yeah. There are sort of drive-up fast food places that have quite a bit of things, but I still don't think. I actually anticipated that by now we would have more of that. So I'm along the lines of the writers of this show in terms of I thought there would be more like automated drive-thrus where you could select various things from a menu. I think it's just now more people do it through their own devices, and it just sends it to the store. So they do all that on their own device rather than something at the location.
Yeah.
And they just pick it up.
Yeah. Right. So I think I'm going to give this 8 out of 10. I'm going to give it an extra point for Yancy Butler. The way she delivered the line, I didn't want to give him back, and it was so raw, and she just nailed it. Yeah. So I'll give it 8, an extra point for that.
I'm torn. Do I want to give a half score? I haven't done that in a long time.
I'm happy to accept halves.
Because I'm kind of somewhere in between 6 and 7, but I'll be nice. I'll round it up and give it a 7. Because it was still enjoyable. I didn't. The previous episodes that I ranked 6, I think there were a couple of them. I drifted a little bit more than I did in this one, so I'll say this one qualifies as a 7. It's a low set.
Also, as you said, the mood that you're in can very much affect.
Yeah, that's true.
How you experience the program. Maybe it's like the tolerance for the slower bits. Obviously, if it's really good, it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I would say of the ones I've given a 7, this one was the least good, and it was because it just seemed to lose focus a few occasions. Whereas I think probably previous episodes I gave a 7 to were a little bit better in that area. I didn't think the guest actors were that strong. They weren't bad, but they seemed a little generic. Whereas some of the previous episodes have had better guest actors.
And we also had that thing where you said there was a scene with the guest cast early on, and it reminded me of your comment of really don't need this.
Oh yeah, the one with the Mexican cartel or whatever they were supposed to be.
Yeah, and it reminded me of that. We really don't need this at this point.
Yeah,
we should just discover what they discover as they discover it.
Right. This episode did that a little better. I think we really only had one brief scene with them separate, and it was relevant enough because she had the phone conversation with the broker guy, so it fit sort of.
Yeah, but the reason why I don't like that so much is that if you put in there up front so the audience knows more than Eve and Bobby, then you're waiting for Eve and Bobby to catch up to what you already know.
Right.
And I don't.
Yeah, and part of that, I mean, I'm always thinking that's the case, but I like mystery. To me, almost you almost can't have too much mystery. Now, you can have too many twists.
Yeah.
Twists are just put in for the sake of having a twist. But I don't think you can have too much mystery or too much suspense. Like, to me, the more of that, the better, because to me, it comes off more realistic that way. Because in real life, even the most experienced detective still encounters things they haven't seen before.
Right.
You still have to start from a point of view of, yes, they have their previous experience. Yes, they can use clues to put things together. But there's still a lot of things they don't know. And the TV version of detectives always figure things out way too quickly and know things that they just wouldn't have the capacity to know all that.
Yeah, and also I think that if you give the audience that information first, then maybe there's a pressure. Whereas I think if the audience only knows what the two detectives know, then maybe you can parcel it out a little bit with the information and stretch out the mystery a bit more.
I think I've said this before in previous things, that dramatic irony can be effective, but you have to establish it in a way that still builds suspense rather than, like you said, it just being they have to catch up to the audience.
Yeah, like, oh, someone's been killed, and then it's like, okay, how did they get killed? Or it raises further questions.
Yeah, right. Obviously, every episode of Columbo starts out with, you know who the killer is, so you're not trying to figure out who the killer is. The entertainment comes from how Columbo pieces together everything.
Yeah, and especially how he uses his brilliant brain.
Right, all of his interactions with the killer to get them to give up their own information.
Yeah, and for me, it's like, is the intelligence of the plots really good in those early ones, especially with Columbo, the way he would figure it out. Sort of high IQ plots to sort of like write plots like that.
Right, because even though they would show the audience what happened, it was still a matter of they didn't dumb it down for the audience in terms of it wasn't just like Columbo stumbles onto a really idiotic killer somehow.
No.
It's like
it's how he catches them. It's how he outsmarts them. That's the thing.
Yeah, most of the time they would eventually give themselves away somehow, but it wasn't like over the top stupidly,
No, it was through a clever sort of setup.
Right.
And they're the cleverest out of the detective shows that I've seen. I've not seen that many. The Columbos had the best use of logic, I would say, from a detective to catch out the villain. But
that having been said, I still enjoy murder mysteries more than I do ones where they show you who the killer is from the start. I prefer that myself. I would say of shows that do reveal the killer, that show is probably the best at still making it entertaining, but I still like it better when it's a mystery.
Yeah, and it's like when they had Murder, She Wrote, and it's like the only variation they would have in that is that the murder was done in self-defense or something.
Yeah. Well, that's another reason why I do like soap operas, because usually when they did murder mysteries, not only the character killed, but usually the murderer, that they were established characters. They weren't just random people that came out of nowhere. And that made it all the more interesting because you knew at the end of all this, most likely somebody that is a character that we've come to know and love or hate, depending on the show, is going to end up being the one who did the killing. And sometimes it's one of the so-called heroes, not necessarily a villain. It's somebody that, for whatever reason was pushed into that situation. I mean, so you can create a lot more suspense and drama about that because the whole promotion of it is it's one of these people. It's not just some random person that came out of nowhere.
Yeah. So Eve leaves this big message on the screen. Hey, have you found the? It's like she doesn't like close that notification. Oh no, I've not found them. It's like,
well, yeah, they weren't. I think it was they weren't looking at it, so that's a little bit different. But
yeah, but you close it, and it's like really like if you're doing a good job of an INTP, forgetting about those obvious little details.
Yeah, she didn't put her hands over it like nothing to see here.
Yeah, but she could have come on, so close it. No. Yeah. Right then. So I've given it 8. You've rounded it up to 7.
Yeah.
And we only have one more left.
Yes. So, hold on a second. I always forget and get rid of it before I say it, but this time I'm going to get it before we go away because it's the final episode. So I have one more opportunity to say, join us next week for Cold, Cold Heart, the final episode of Man and Machine.
Right then.
Bye-bye.